What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast, Baseball Edition, powered by Anna and Sean Levine Accident Attorneys. I am here with Mr. Perfect Javi Salas. First baseball podcast of the offseason. A lot to get to, a lot of action, even though there's no games being played on the field in the orange and green. A lot to talk about. Javi, before we get into it, word from some of the best friends that Canes baseball has.
This episode of the CanesInSight podcast is brought to you by our friends at Sala Astorita & Cox, a boutique law firm focusing on securities regulatory matters, broker-dealer and investment advisor regulation, white-collar criminal defense, complex commercial litigation, and securities arbitration and litigation. The firm aggressively represents clients throughout the nation. Contact them now at 561-989-9080. or visit them online at salalaw.com.
All right, Hav. So listen, watching the NCAA tournament, I am just thinking back to a lot of things that you have been talking about all season as far as the landscape of college baseball and how it impacts Miami. First and foremost, with Miami being down, we're going to talk about all the transfer portal departures, all potential additions and the strategy in the portal. Obviously, Blake Sear, Jason Torres. We're going to talk about all that. But big picture, you've been saying all year that the ACC is loaded. It's not all about the SEC, despite the packed stadiums and everything else, that the ACC is a force to be reckoned with. And we got, Pete, pull up the tweet. You got the 5 ACC teams that hosted a regional, not only all advanced to super regionals, but they went 15-1. UVA, UNC, NC State, Clemson, and FSU. So what you were saying all year wasn't just excuse making, because there's a lot of reasons why Miami was in the position they were in, but this really was a banner year for the ACC.
Yeah, look, and I think you hit the nail on the head, right? A tremendously stacked conference from top to bottom, and you look at that list right there of those 5 teams. Miami takes the series from UVA, from UNC. They have Clemson on the ropes on Saturday night. So for being one of the tougher conferences, obviously we're on par, right there with the SEC, both sending 5 teams to super regionals. It's something, the ACC can hang their hat on. It's a tremendous showing. And look, I think one of the better weekends, I think, just watching baseball from a fan's perspective. Obviously, we kill for Miami to be in this position and Miami be listed in this tweet as one of the teams advancing to supers, but those really great baseball played. I mean, I was watching that the UNC LSU game on Monday night, goes into extra innings. I mean, a packed house in Chapel Hill, and you're playing the defending national champions in LSU. They pack the house. They bring a ton of fans. So great atmospheres all around. Something that I spoke to all year long was just how deep the conference is, 1-13, 1-14, right? There's no easy weekends. You're never going to have a weekend in the ACC where you can circle and say, we are going to sweep this team because we are head and shoulders better than them. We've seen college baseball evolve. There's good baseball being played everywhere. We see a team like Evansville advancing to a super regional. You have UConn from the Northeast advancing to a super regional. So there's just a ton of good baseball. The ACC is on par with the SEC, some of the best baseball in the country.
Yeah, look, I think back to a game I was at, North Carolina, where Miami blew out North Carolina. And I hate to say it, Blake Sear hitting 2 home runs. Let's just go there and stop beating around the bush. Some major transfer portal departures for the Canes. Probably the one that hurt Canes fans the most, Blake Sear entering the portal. Just talking to different people, it sounded like there was just time for a change. A lot going on, nothing dramatic or anything like that. But it was just, sounded like it was time for a change. Really unfortunate because he showed so much potential in the orange and green.
Yeah, look, and I think obviously there was a lot of stuff off the field with Blake this year, dealing with some death in the family and stuff that we had touched on, but obviously no one can really understand what's going on in his mind. He has a tremendous freshman campaign, comes out and hot out of the gates, and then succumbs to an injury, a thumb injury against Duke, doesn't find his way back into the lineup. But injury kind of lingered, and obviously you root for Blake. He's one of those kids that you had high hopes for in this program. I thought that they would. He'd come back and have a tremendous junior year. But, in this portal era, this NIL era, there's opportunities to sort of chart a different course. And look, I think I'm all for giving the kid a fresh start. I root for him. I think he's he was a great ambassador for the program. Really good dude. I wish him the best. But, yeah, it does sting. It obviously someone that we had penciled in early on in the season for, who knows what sort of season he could have had he stayed healthy and, hitting in front of or behind Daniel Cuvée. Obviously, we saw what Cuvée did. So, Tough loss for the program. That being said, Blake is going to get a fresh start somewhere else, and I'm sure there's going to be ample opportunity for someone to step up and fill in his role.
And we're going to talk about that because that really is what this offseason is all about, and we're going to cover it like nobody else on this podcast. We got some more additions to talk about with Bobby Marsh. We'll get into all that. But while we're on the subject of transfers out, the list, as I understand it now, I expect more names to be added to this, but just the names I know off the top: Blake Sear, first baseman Jason Torres, who was one of Miami's hotter hitters in the first half of the year; J.D. Urso, who finished the season at first base, probably shouldn't; middle infielder Ashton Crowther, who had some ups and downs in that sort of midweek spot; Chris Diaz, a young arm with potential; and again, more names to be added. Want to focus on Torres in particular. He's another big name. Had an injury to his elbow, didn't finish the year, really was on quite a slump to finish the year. Struggled a little bit really in conference play, but was outstanding early on, had a big series against Florida, and really was the best hitter for a certain period of time for the Hurricanes, even with Cuvée cooking. So really crazy season for him as far as ups and downs. Talk about the departure of Torres and what it means to the program.
Yeah, look, I think you hit the nail right on the head, right? He was one of Miami's hotter hitters early on in the season. Certainly did struggle once we got into conference play. And look, the conference is a great equalizer, right? You start the season off with some teams that sort of warm you up for ACC play, and that's not a knock on any team. We saw LIU go into the Chapel Hill Regional and really hold their own that first game, right? UNC needed a walk-off grand slam to beat them. So, Torres took advantage of some of that early season pitching. Once we got into conference, people get figured out. You got to make adjustments. We saw his average slip a little bit, didn't have the same power production, runs batted in production. But look, it's another guy who's probably going to get a fresh start elsewhere. I know he's dealing with an elbow injury presently, so I don't know what his health status is going into next season. But he'll find his way. I'm sure there'll be some suitors for him. And look, I think in this portal era, right, it was the total opposite a couple years back, where on both ends, there was no way to sort of turn your roster over because guys were kind of locked into spots. Kids couldn't leave because you had to sit out a year. Now there's this free market. Guys can go out and test the portal. So I think it works better for both sides in this sort of situation, D. And we're kind of seeing that all across the board, right? We've seen teams that were playing well into regionals losing some of their big impact players. So it's not like this is a Miami-specific issue. This is across the country. Guys are taking advantage of the transfer portal. I know I saw some tweets that I think in the first 8 minutes of the portal being opened, over 1,500 names entered. So it's like you can fill up full rosters of teams with guys that are in the portal right now.
Yeah, Miami is going to be extremely aggressive, as we'll get to. Which, by the way, before we get any further, Javi, the Bullpen Mafia podcast, it'll be tearing up social, some great stuff. Story about you pitching to Jose Fernandez was classic if you guys haven't seen that. So listen, like and subscribe, not just to this video, but also to the Bullpen Mafia podcast. We'll drop a link in the description of this YouTube and also in the thread on CanesInsight.com forums. Javi, get a little plug here while you're here before we move on to what Miami's going to do in the portal and some of the good news on the portal front for Miami. Talk about the Bullpen Mafia pod.
Yeah, Bullpen Mafia started as a little bit of a passion project. Me and a couple buddies, one of my former teammates in the Brewers organization, Steven Peterson and Eric Todorov, a good buddy of mine for my whole life, Belen guy. We just started this podcast. Last week we had Glenn Geffner on, former radio play-by-play for the Marlins. We're just looking to beef up our roster with players that we've interacted with, guys that are currently in professional baseball at the minor league, major league level, and we're just kind of spanning the whole spectrum of baseball. Just three guys just kind of shooting the breeze like we're sitting in the bullpen in the middle of a baseball game in the summer. So check us out, Bullpen Mafia Pod, on all socials and on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
So listen, in terms of this roster, Miami Hurricanes, they need to beef up the bullpen. They need a Javi Salas on the mound who can start midweek, who can give you some size and some sink out of the starter role. We need a lot. And Miami, I don't want to get into too many specifics. I've seen some names out there. This is a competitive process. You want to move in silence. I can tell you, and Javi can confirm, Miami is going to be very, very aggressive in the portal. They already are being very aggressive in the portal. This is a very sophisticated process, innovative in many ways. It's hard to talk about kind of getting into details, but just take our word for it. Just the way Miami has been dominant in other areas that involve Canes connection, football, basketball. Now baseball is firmly on that radar. and Miami expects to significantly upgrade this roster in multiple spots. And that's, look, you lose a Jason Torres, you lose a Blake Sear. Those are talented bats, but you are talking about right-handed hitters, limited defensive value, guys that don't necessarily run well. Of course, these are good players. They're going to find a home. But I think Miami is going to radically change their roster. They have no choice, right? People are leaving. And try to make it look a little more physical, a little more athletic, a little more left-handed. Look more like what you're seeing while we watch ESPN Plus and all these great games across the country in the NCAA tournament. And part of that is Miami's newest addition, which is Bobby Marsh, left-handed hitter and outfielder out of Penn State. This is somebody who played under Coach Cooper, Miami's director of program development. So this was a coach connection, and spoke to somebody with MLB experience for a scouting report on Cooper. And what we got was, I'll read it out here for those listening: an athletic, lean corner outfielder with a line drive approach, handsy hitter with bat speed that can get the ball or get to all parts of the zone and take advantage of mistakes on diverse pitch types. Raw power in the hit tool to be a 5-10 home run guy in any given season, and shows it to the middle and opposite fields. Strong performer versus right-handed pitching. That's the majority of pitching in college baseball. Right-handed pitching, a lot of fastballs, with the majority of his output stemming from those at-bats. Effective approach allows him to compete versus left-handed hitting as well, so not necessarily a pure platoon guy, and do damage, all having reverse K rates, striking out less versus left-handed pitchers as opposed to right-handed pitchers. So, again, from a bat standpoint, that is something that's going to help the Miami Hurricanes, just getting a left-handed bat who is not a liability against left-handed pitchers. You think about Jake Kulikowski and what he could be. Seems like Bobby Marsh, 6'3", 190, kind of fits that bill already. Stat-wise, 310 batting average, which is nice. 384 on base, 490 slug. On the defensive end, this is a corner outfielder. Projection, runs well, makes the routine plays with ease, more than capable, average defender at the ACC level. And probably someone who projects lower in the lineup. But you think back to last year, Villegas, Costello, Jacoby Long, obviously a center fielder, but at the plate, this guy on paper seems at least to be an upgrade. And this is just the start of what's going to be a very deep portal class.
Yeah, look, and I think more than anything, you're getting an experienced player, right? 2-year starter at Penn State, was all Big Ten freshman team last season, hit over 300 in both seasons. I think that sort of raises the floor of your team, right? You want to have guys that you have a deep roster. Again, a left-handed bat, which is worth its weight in gold, especially this time of year we were playing in the postseason. And I think you hit the nail on the head. You project a guy like Jake Kulikowski. This guy's a little bit more refined, can sort of plug and play right away. You know exactly what you have. And I think you're getting a player who, look, for better or for worse, man, this guy's been playing in Pennsylvania his whole life. He's going to come down to South Florida. He's not going to have to hit in the wintertime. He's not going to have to hit in 30-degree weather. So, the ball might fly a little more. Who knows what those home run and production numbers look like in a hitter-friendly park like Marklight Stadium. So, again, I think it's a really good get to start off the portal class for the Canes. I'm sure this elevates, like I said, that outfield crop that they currently have. Again, a guy with experience, a guy you can play right away, a guy who you can trust. There's obviously some familiarity with Coach Cooper. So I thought this was a great get. Obviously, that scouting report echoes everything that you just mentioned. Again, this is the kind of momentum you want to start building, start, getting guys in, start understanding that, hey, we are going to be aggressive. We're going to get players from notable teams. We're going to get players from big programs. Penn State is a Big Ten program, right? So a really, really nice, solid player, nice addition to the roster for next season.
Yeah, and look, we talk about the portal being aggressive. This is a floor-raising piece, I think an improvement for the reasons, Javi, you stated. But overall, Miami is going to be shopping in the expensive part of Whole Foods. They're going to be looking at the filet mignon. This is like, you look at Texas A&M and how they've been operating. Texas A&M was not afraid to go to Stanford and get Braden Montgomery. I think you're going to see that kind of approach from the Miami Hurricanes. And if you say, you're just talking, look at what you saw in football. Look at what you saw in basketball. Why would baseball be any different when that is the focus of improvement? Didn't happen last year. The timing didn't make sense. JD came on late, as we talked about ad nauseum. And look, I'm not making excuses for anything that happened on the field. I'm talking about this part of the process. Canes Connection has shown that they can compete with the big boys. In football, in basketball. Why should baseball be any different? This is a program with much more tradition than basketball and comparable tradition to football, much more recent success. Look at the last couple of years. This was a top 10 program.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
no, I don't understand why fans are down right now, but expect Miami to compete at that high level on top of getting quality additions like a guy like Marsh, who again had the coaching connection with Coach Cooper. And then also looking at guys that maybe are overlooked. And Pete, if you could pull up the tweet about UConn, I thought this was fascinating. So we saw North Carolina, the game-winning hit against LSU, the blue blood programs, came from a D3 player.
Yeah.
UConn, which won their regional, 9 former D3 players, 7 of them playing over the weekend. So if you're talking about remaking this team, I think it's not just the big-ticket items. It's not just a great recruiting class ranked 4th in perfect game. It's not just kind of guys like Bobby Marsh who you have a connection to and can improve your roster. It's also guys like this, which Javi, again, to give you credit, you were talking about this all year, that the parity of college baseball is like it's never been. And now we're seeing it here with these guys shining on the biggest stage.
Yeah, look, and one of the things I found most fascinating this weekend and just watching college baseball was like, do I know if this is a high school player that actually committed to this program, or is he a transfer portal? I found myself on my phone the majority of the game trying to understand roster pieces, where they came from, how they ended up here. You look at across the big name programs, right? Like you look at UNC, a ton of guys from the transfer portal. Obviously, we've talked at length about Florida State, how they remade their roster overnight. This was a last place team in the conference last year, Florida State. So let's reiterate that, last place, and they are hosting a super regional this weekend against UConn, right? They're one step away from Omaha. So don't tell me this can't be done. There is a blueprint, and one of the things I've kind of stood on this entire season, again, is parity, but there's good baseball played at every level, and there's hidden gems all over the place. And I think Miami's innovative approach, casting a wide net, not only to your point, shopping at the expensive part of Whole Foods, but they're shopping at all the Whole Foods. They're going to all the different grocery stores and seeing, where the best value is, how to make this roster better, right? The piece of that is with the high school recruiting. We mentioned the top 4 class. That's fantastic. You mentioned some of the guys that are returning. Obviously there's some pieces on last year's roster. It was not a great season on paper, but there are some pieces in place. And then you just add on with the transfer portal, right? So you look across college baseball, this is everywhere, guys. This is not just a Miami issue. This is everyone is going into the portal to retool, to refine, make their roster better around the edges. I think that's where you see the biggest difference, right? I think when you look at some of these teams that are playing in super regionals this week, and I look at some of their bullpen arms, a lot of those guys are transfer guys, older veteran guys who have pitched in a lot of different situations. There's just more experience going into these games, late in games. You want to have guys who have been in this. And look, one of Miami's, basically the moment where it kind of all unraveled was Miles Caba having a pitch in that game 3 against Duke, right? 3 games in a row. What a luxury it would have been if Miami had another left-handed arm, another arm they could have relied on out of that bullpen. Again, an area of the team that really, really struggled, especially towards the end of the season. We had 2 reliable guys, D. You can't go into a super regional or regional where you're playing 4 games. You might have to come out of the losers bracket. You see all these different teams throwing out 8, 9 guys. I think the LSU hung in that game with their starter. I don't think he recorded an out on Monday night, so he doesn't get an out in that game, and they go into extra innings. I mean, I just don't think Miami was built for that style of struggle this year, and that's something you can address right away in the transfer portal. That's something that is probably the easiest pickings. There's probably a ton of pitchers. I can't put a number on it because I don't exactly know, but I go out and say that probably 60% of the guys in the transfer portal are pitchers. You can really retool your roster quickly, and again, give yourself a chance to play late in the season, and you do that with good defense and really good bullpen execution.
And I wanted to ask you about that, which is, look, we talked about how we want this offense to be remade as far as the type, right? You're talking about getting more physical, bigger, more athletic, looking the part, getting more left-handed with your better bats, right? Because this was our best bats were all right-handed hitters. You're going against right-handed pitchers who throw majority fastballs. You want left-handed hitters to hit that pitch, and we didn't have enough premium there. So we talked about all that. Pitching staff-wise, we know you talk generally, but you look at this game through a high-level lens, particularly pitching. What pitching profile do you think that this team could use more of?
Yeah, we need big starting pitchers. I think we need big athletic guys. Something obviously the Gage Zeal profile, something that I look at. Gage pitched probably close to 100 innings this season and got stronger as the year went on. I think as you play late into May, into June, if you really have aspirations of making it to Omaha, you got to have some semblance of 3 to 4 starting pitchers. And they don't have to be world beaters, D. I think you're seeing a lot of teams playing right now that don't necessarily have these tremendous ace style pitchers, but they do have 3 and 4 guys that they could rely on to go start a game, give them a little bit of length, and then get into that bullpen, right? So I want to see athletic pitchers. I want to see a big profile pitcher. Again, the stuff is off the charts right now. You look at what guys are throwing, and I'm looking across the country, and I would have never been able to pitch in this era with my velocity and my stuff. I mean, everyone seems to be 94, 96 miles an hour, right-handed, left-handed, doesn't really matter. Good feel for breaking ball, changeup. You look just across the country and you see these pitchers that it looks like aliens, right? And, outside of Gage Zeal this year, Miami didn't necessarily have a guy who could fit the bill as a number 2, number 3, or number 4. So you got to go out and you got to get some experience. I think, starting pitching, one of the biggest factors, especially now in the postseason, is experience. Guys who have been in these sorts of situations before aren't going to back down from any challenges. Go get starting pitchers. Go address your relief pitching, and you can do that easily, whether it's junior college, D2, D3. There's good arms everywhere, like I said, D. Go address those needs. Come back with a more athletic pitching staff, a pitching staff that instills a little bit more fear in opposing hitters. I think we saw some of the teams we played late. Duke had some big power arms that really came out of the bullpen and sort of stunned Miami late in the game. Miami was missing that this year outside of Caba and Nick Roberts. So address that, add some depth to that bullpen, and then we're talking about a whole new ball club here next year.
And let me ask you this, because I've always, you've watched obviously way more college baseball than me over your life, and you've lived it. I was always an MLB guy, so I looked at college baseball from very much an MLB perspective, and I do not remember there being this many college first-round picks up and down. You always had your Mark Pryors and guys like that, but I look at the mock drafts for the MLB draft, and it's like, the NFL draft. We've seen all these guys. They're not high schoolers that we're just reading about. I mean, I'm pulling up the ACC in the top 15 of Baseball America. Chase Burns from Wake Forest, Nick Kurtz, Wake Forest, Seaver King, Wake Forest, James Tibbs, Florida State, Cam Smith, Florida State, Vance Honeycutt, North Carolina. I mean, that's 6 guys from our own conference, not including, these SEC monsters that you're seeing, the Hagen Smiths from Arkansas, guys like that. Obviously, the big third baseman Condon from Georgia, the Oregon State with the mutant they got at second base. I mean, It feels like college baseball is becoming almost more like the NFL, where you better have first rounders to win, like LSU did last year, as opposed to just being a kind of a scrappy bunch. Yeah,
look, the talent level's unbelievable. You mentioned the 6 guys from the conference that are in the projected top 15 picks. I saw Chase Burns last week, in the ACC tournament, put on an absolute show, right? I think that's probably a guy, and I'm probably speaking a little out of turn here, but you can put that guy in AA right now in a big league organization. He'll do just fine. Just, the stuff he has, the profile. You look at Nick Kurtz at first base, massive first baseman, powered all fields. He looks like he's a big leaguer already, right? And he's playing at Wake Forest. And look, 10 years ago when I was playing, Wake Forest didn't get these types of guys, right? Wake Forest has totally revamped their program over the last 10 years to become an unrecognizable force in the ACC. I remember we used to go and play Wake Forest, and we'd laugh because they had a sign in right field that they were the only team in the ACC that had ever won a national championship. They won it in 1955. So we were like, we'd always look at that thing out there and just crack up because they were not close to that. But now you look at Wake Forest and they're a heartbeat away from Omaha the last 4 or 5 years, right? So baseball's changing. I think the shortened draft, the focus on signability, especially out of high school, you get a lot more high-level players coming to play at the collegiate level. Look, and Miami's right in the middle of that, right? I know last week we talked about some of the guys who are on the doorstep of the major leagues for the Hurricanes. We're talking about Andrew Walters in AAA. CJ Kafis just got called up to AA. Palmquist is in AA. So, Slade Cicconi's up and down AAA. He started the other day for the D-backs. There's so many guys the last 4 seasons that are right on the cusp of the major leagues for the Miami Hurricanes. Why not, bring in some of those players? This is a tremendous place to be, man. I think there's a lot of pride in this program. I mean, you see it. There's passionate fans. There's nothing like a packed Mark-Light Stadium against a rival Florida State of Florida. We're seeing with the football program that bravado, trying to instill some fear in the opponents again, right? Like Miami's best when people are kind of worried about what they're doing. And we see it in football, more than anything. I mean, you see all these crazy lunatic Florida State writers that are, seemingly Miami's business all the time. And that's the kind of Miami I think they want to bring back. We're seeing Mario do that in football. Baseball is definitely going to be aggressive in the portal this year. They're going to be felt. I think that's the most important thing. They're going to be some names that come and hopefully change this program around next season.
And I'm glad you brought up Wake Forest. I'm looking at this up while you're talking, which is, I think Wake Forest, I think of like the pitching lab, right? Like trying to get the most out of guys, right? Do it with tricks and development and all that. But really think about it. Seaver King, Wingate transfer, Division II transfer, tears up the Cape at Wake Forest. And then Chase Burns transferred, and I didn't know this, from Tennessee.
Yeah.
The best team in the country. So it's like, it's what we're talking about. It's the combination of, yes, you can develop and everything else and the coaching, et cetera, but you got to find guys that are too good for the level they're at. And then you got to go with the big boys and go grab somebody.
Right. And look, and I think Chase Burns' sort of situation is really compelling, right? He leaves Tennessee, the number one team in the nation last year. Tennessee doesn't miss a beat. They're the number one overall seed. They win the SEC regular season. They win the SEC tournament. So, like, that's the kind of level you need to aspire to as a program, as an organization. Like, hey, we know we're gonna lose guys. Like, people are hurt and pissed off that Blake is leaving, and that's a big loss. But Miami needs to get to the level where you understand that there's going to be subtractions every single year in the transfer portal. That's just part of the game. That's the way it is now. Whether you like it or not, this is the new era of collegiate athletics. You're going to lose guys, but you have to have the confidence that you're going to go out and get someone equal or better to that caliber of player. And I think Miami's on the right track. We're going to be aggressive this offseason. We've already seen, some names sort of there's movement. There's going to be stuff that happens here in the next, days, weeks that people are going to start getting excited about this program again.
And look, it's like people are seeing this and they're like, oh, why should we believe this? There's some names I wish we could talk about. I haven't teed up, but I promise you, when we get these names in the boat, we will be talking about it here on the CanesInSight podcast, really breaking them down and going over, like I said, with the MLB scouting report on Marsh. We'll be getting scouting reports, video on all these top guys that we're bringing in and really breaking it down in a way that we haven't in the past. So thank you for joining us. Like and subscribe. Also, remember, like and subscribe and go follow on social. You do the plug. Bullpen Mafia, where can they find you?
On Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, follow and subscribe to the Bullpen Mafia. We really appreciate it. But D, it's exciting, man. This is an exciting time of year. I know that it's obviously tough. We got to watch Florida and Florida State this weekend. I'm going to be rooting really hard for UConn, man. Didn't think I'd say that after we lost to them in the Final Four 2 years back, but I really hope those Huskies pull it out in Tallahassee this weekend. I know we got to root for Clemson, which it's, the lesser of two evils, I guess, playing the Gators in Clemson, South Carolina. But again, really good time for college baseball. I urge whoever's listening to this podcast, watch some of these games, man. They're really exciting. There's a ton of passion. These kids are, it's a really good level of baseball. And in a year where the Hurricanes aren't playing, take out a notepad, man. See what you like. See some players, and I guarantee you there is so many guys on these rosters that have bounced around. I'd go out and venture that a lot of these teams have 10, 12 guys that have been at a previous school. So watch the games, see what you like. Let us know. It's a great time of year, man. This is a great time of year where college baseball really shows off.
Canes baseball or CanesInSight baseball forums pop in. Everybody's the names up in the portal. Everybody's like, hey, is this guy fit? And look, some of them are going to be a fit. This is Miami's all over all of these names that are jumping in and evaluating them at a high level. So I wish I could say some of the names, but hopefully these guys come to Miami, and I promise you, once they do, we'll be breaking them down in detail. So good. Thanks everybody for supporting the show. Go Canes.
Go Canes.